get hooked up with a group of people that get together to paint portraits or paint landscapes together. Being around other artists and sharing your ideas and their advice. And I learned a lot from people that I painted with about how I could get into shows and get into galleries and finding out a lot more information than I could have ever gleaned on my own. And then doing like competitions, just getting your name out there. And because you never know when you might get discovered by a gallery just because you had your work in a show.
Welcome to the BoldBrush Show, where we believe that fortune favors the bold brush. My name is Laura Arango-Bayer, and I'm your host. For those of you who are new to the podcast, we are a podcast that covers art marketing techniques and all sorts of business tips, specifically to help artists learn to better sell their work. We interview artists at all stages of their careers, as well as others who are in careers tied to the art world in order to hear their advice and insights. On today's episode, we sat down with Scott Tallman Powers, a fine artist specializing in Western scenes who is always looking to capture the connection between humans and their environment. Scott discusses his artistic journey from studying at the American Academy of Art to transitioning from illustration to becoming a professional painter. He emphasizes the importance of painting from life, understanding abstract foundations, and the balance between realism and narrative storytelling. Scott highlights the challenges of meeting deadlines while maintaining quality, the benefits of plein air painting, and the necessity of diversifying income streams through workshops, commissions, and selling smaller studies, while also maintaining strong relationships with collectors through genuine communication. He also reminds artists to get yourself out there and to find a good artist community to motivate and inspire you to continue on your journey. Finally, Scott tells us about his upcoming workshop and exhibitions, including a collaborative landscape and figure workshop with Scott Christensen, and his participation in the Briscoe Museum Night of the Artists and the Prix de West. Welcome, Scott, to the BoldBrush Show. How are you today?
Doing good. Thank you so much for having me, Laura.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I know that you are under tons of deadlines, but I absolutely love your work. I think there's this gorgeous quality to it. It feels narrative and it feels real and it feels, honestly, you really capture the beauty of like that cowboy life, which I think is really awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, to do my best.
Of course.
It's always a challenge, as you know.
Yeah, I mean, realism is a very difficult style and very difficult genre to work in because you're competing obviously with reality and someone can tell when something's wrong, right? But your work is absolutely gorgeous. So I'm really excited to discuss it and to discuss your process. But before we dive into all of that, do you mind telling us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Well, I'm Scott Powers, and I went to the American Academy of Art in Chicago for 4 years, and I was an illustrator right out of school, and then I was there for about at the ad agency about 4 years, and then went off on my own, and I was doing illustration work and storyboard work, and then kind of transitioned into the fine art world. So, and doing portraits and stuff, of course, too.
Yeah,
It's
and
its own job.
for sure. And I think what's also really cool is you're one of the artists. You're one of the types of artists that I think just amaze me, which is artists who start off with illustration and then become realist painters. I feel like there's always this like I mentioned before, like this narrative quality to the work that just comes off so naturally, like and so intuitively just because of studying illustration. I think it's awesome. It's such a super power to have that.
Yeah, well, in art school, I was going to just major in illustration,
Mhm.
and when I saw that class, and they were doing great work and everything, but it was more about the technique, and I wanted to learn more about life drawing and oil painting and watercolors, and so I switched to be a fine art major, and so I had twice as much life drawing and painting and everything else, and that's all I did, because I knew that getting that base, that strong base,
Yeah.
then I could go off and do my own illustrations afterwards, and learn the techniques easier.
Mm.
But without that strong foundation, um, you know, you're kind of like you don't have as much tools in your toolbox. You know?
Yes, definitely. And I think it's so important to have both, especially if you're going to do like narrative, multifigural compositions, which
Oh
you
yeah.
do, of course, because there's so much in like yes, you can gain technique from, you have the model, you have the cast, you have all of these tools, right, that just give you technique, but technique doesn't inherently teach you composition or color harmony or storytelling through color and composition, right? Those are all things that I feel complete that picture that, just fine art doesn't quite complete anymore, at least in the modern iterations of art school. I feel like maybe in the past that could have been, more fulfilled. Um, but I think illustration really fills that void that
Mhm.
narrative painters really need for their work.
Well, all the old illustrators like Howard Pyle and N.C. Wyeth and all those guys. Uh, we just idolize them, and I still do. And just with their storytelling abilities, and I mean, we all looked at them as like they're fine artists telling stories rather than illustrators, and
Right.
and I put Norman Rockwell in there too. But I always looked
Mm-hmm.
at him as just an amazing fine artist. And
Absolutely.
we used to get in art school, we get in these arguments about like some people would think they're just strictly an illustrator. I'm like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. They're amazing fine artists. They just happen to be used
Yes,
for some sort of illustration purposes.
exactly. Yeah. And I think what's really interesting as well is, and I like to use Rembrandt as a very good example because, or even Botticelli or any of the painters of, around 1500s, 1600s, because if you look at a Rembrandt painting of a person and you really look at it and you think, no one looks like that. No one actually looks like that. Or like you look at any sculpture by Michelangelo and you see that it's mostly architectural, it's not a real human. Then you realize that there's this really beautiful gray zone between realism and what would be caricature,
Mhm.
right? Which would be like the extreme version of like illustration, but like that there's that magic zone of in between where it's interpretation, but also a little bit exaggerated, just enough that it
Right.
looks good, you know?
Hmm. And you can
Yeah.
push and pull that, a little bit.
Yes. Exactly, exactly. Yeah, that's where the magic happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then,
Hmm.
painting from life, uh, I mean, the your interaction with the model, it automatically gets into the piece. I mean, you can't help it. And
Hmm.
that's why it's always really difficult for me to paint someone I don't really care for that much. If they really bug me, I can't even do it. So it's very hard because I try to
Yeah.
connect with them so much.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, you can't help but paint them angry, I guess.
oh, something's gonna come out. Something, and you don't know what it's
Yeah.
gonna be.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. Um, but actually also I wanted to ask you too, because I think it's really fascinating to dive into artists' paths because they can be so unexpected and they can range so much. So I wanted to ask you when your artist's path began.
Well, um, I've been drawing ever since I was little. My birth father was a medical illustrator,
Mm.
and he's Rod Powers, and my adopted father is David Tallman. So that's where the two names come together.
Okay.
So honoring both fathers, because I wouldn't be where I am today without both of them. So, but having that the beginning of my life, watching my dad uh, draw and paint, and he was more of a watercolorist. I mean, that was pretty important times for me growing up because I just it was always around, and then I was just drawing because it just came natural, and I really wanted to be as I got older. I wanted to be a professional baseball player because I was pretty good back then, and
Mhm.
that didn't work out so well. So, so then I focused on my art, and then went to art school, and that was like a no-brainer because I we were eating, sleeping, and breathing art all every single day. That's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do anything else, and I just worked my brains out. So, right up, I had two good, amazing teachers, influential teachers in high school, um, and outside of Chicago. And they were the ones who got me started, got me on my path to pursuing art as a life and a career. And and they, my Mr. Franken was the one that told me you need to go to the American Academy because I was looking at Art Center out in California and some other ones around the country, but the American Academy of Art was perfect for me. And I had some incredible teachers that were very, very special. So um, it came right out of high school. That's whenever I started really focusing on it. So
Yeah, very early, which is great. Um,
yeah.
Gives you a lot of time to experiment and to try stuff out, which is
Oh yeah.
really cool. Yeah. Yeah, and that goes to show how important it is to have that support system as well. I mean, it must have been awesome to have, your father and he's a painter and observing him and seeing how, how he was probably so focused on his work and, I can only imagine how awesome it is for him to have shown you what he was up to as well.
And my mother was an interior
Mm.
designer, and she was fantastic with color,
There
composition, and she would irritate me sometimes when I was in school because she would critique my work, and then she would be right every time, but I would get
you
irritated by it because I was like, "What are you talking about?"
go.
And I'd go back and I would say, "Yep, she's right."
Yeah.
So it was a double whammy.
Oh, that's awesome. That is so awesome. Yeah, that familiar support is such
It's
such a
huge.
great thing to have. Yeah. Yeah, it can make or break a lot of people because of course some artists they might have struggled with that because oftentimes parents might have the old tale of you'll be poor, you'll be hungry.
Who
Get a
talks?
job that yeah, that's more, I don't know, pragmatic.
Yeah, yeah. So there was talks that kind of stuff about having a backup plan and all that, and I totally agree with it. But it's it's kind of hard to find the balance sometimes, like whenever you're getting started out, and because I was an electrician in Chicago for a while,
Mm.
right out of high school, and learning that trade uh, was really really great. I loved it. I loved working with my hands, and I loved hanging out with the guys and learning something new, and I was doing it for about 4 or 5 years before I went to art school, and I would do it on the side. And but now it comes in really handy, especially like in a new studio. I do my own stuff, and so I know how to fix and build a lot of things. So yeah,
Yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do. And I think actually electrician is very pragmatic because that's one of those jobs that it's always gonna be in demand no matter what.
yeah,
And like you said, it becomes practical later down the line because you never know when you need to fix stuff up in your own studio.
absolutely. And there's a lot of creativity in it too to do it really well and have it be
Mhm.
beautiful coming out of the panel and the pipes coming out of the panel, and then
Yeah,
there's always a creative way of thinking, no matter what you're doing.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And I feel like, as an artist, obviously, you have this easier way of marrying the practical aspects of wiring with the aesthetic aspect. And also this is gonna sound hilarious, but I have actually seen pictures of really well organized and well wired houses because Instagram is just a
Oh
treasure
yeah, I'm a
trove for all
total.
of us.
I got a folder just with that because I'm such a geek about it. I look at them like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, because it's pleasing to the eye to just see everything is just perfectly sorted and you have the wires that have to go through here and through there, but I can see how then that would transfer also into like painting as well because again there's that practicality of well I have to do it in this order but then also the playful aspect of now I can move some stuff around and compose things nicely.
Right.
So
You have
it's
the
very interesting.
strong structure and
Yes.
foundation of a painting, and then be
Mhm.
able to let loose and be more emotional and free and put
Yeah.
a lot of passion into it.
Yeah.
So
That's a very electrical thing to say.
yeah.
Oh man. But actually also speaking of inspiration, what would you say inspires you most in your paintings?
Well, people for sure. And then telling stories about people's lives. Because before doing a lot of Western art, I was traveling around the world to different countries a lot and with the indigenous populations, whether it be in
Mm.
Mexico or China or Morocco, and uh, and seeing all their beautiful clothing and I mean it was just incredible and being able to be in markets and stuff and just be able to uh, to paint their lifestyles and like their everyday life. And I'm fascinated with that. And so even with the Western culture, being on a ranch, helping out with the ranchers and they teach me stuff and I help them and they help me and then getting a lot of reference material uh, to be able to tell their stories honestly. Um, you got to be right there and feeling it and seeing it and that's what it really gets me. So
Mm. Yeah, there's that human connection for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
And
and being outdoors. I love being outdoors, but just telling that story about people's lives, and it just seems like most of my paintings are like set outdoors or in a barn. So I don't know.
yeah, yeah, and actually that brings up these really cool images that you showed me when we did our meet and greet about, how you paint from life, or we're painting from life for a while. I know right now that's become a bit complicated in terms of deadlines, but I thought it was amazing how, you have these gorgeous site size like images that you took of like yourself painting your models from life. I thought that was awesome. Do you mind telling us a bit more about that process and how that's changed over time for you?
Yeah, yeah. I would have a lot of my models, especially when I was back in Chicago, and I was going down to Mexico a lot. So it was great because there's a large Mexican community in Chicago, and then had a bunch of friends and met a bunch of amazing people that posed for me, and I would set them up out behind the building, with this barbed wire fence, and then I'd recreate a scene of what I saw down in Mexico, and then they would come back and pose for me for about 2 weeks, and so we would have like 3 or 4 hour sessions, and a lot of those were like more comparative, and I would do some site sizing too whenever it made sense because sometimes I was painting like a whole scene. That'd be really kind of hard
Yeah.
to do the whole site size method. But anyway, but the site size that we talked about before, I really liked it because it was like we were saying, like go slow to go fast. With all the pacing back and forth, I could paint faster, blocking it all in and getting it more accurate than I could comparatively, because I could just see it right there, right next to each other from my point where I went back to, and then had my
Yeah.
palette back there to where I mixed my colors back there, and it made me really focus focus my attention on the values and the relationships and temperature and everything, and um, and my drawing as well. So I mean, it's huge for drawing. So yeah, so
Yeah.
we didn't do a lot of that in art school where I went. It was more
Mm.
comparative, but uh, but we did some cast type drawings with the site size method. But a lot of what they taught us in school was because they were preparing us to make a living when we got out. So taking a long time to do a drawing or do a painting, um, it's great for study, but they are always reminding you you have to speed it up because you're going to be once you get out of here, you're going to need to paint a lot faster and do it really well.
Mm. Mm.
So
Mhm.
they taught us a lot of different ways of handling things. And so that comes in handy in my life now because I could switch back and forth to do more of a site size method and then get it really close the way I really want it and then go more comparative, and then it just bam, 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 and you're memorizing everything in your head too. So
Yeah, I think that's what's really beautiful about both methods. Because what I particularly love about side size, especially if you're a person who gets too, like me, because it happens to me, a person who gets too caught up in little details. Sometimes if you let your mind, wander, side size is great for preventing that because you're so zoomed out. Like you
yeah,
have to step back. You have
right,
to see the full picture as often as you can and see those relationships. Um, and it's so important because then once you have comparative, right, you can pull it out of your pocket like another tool and be like, there's something in this weird little corner here that's not quite working. I'm just gonna, comparative measure it and see what I need to fix. And I think that's, yeah, like you said, it's both methods just complement each other so well, that it helps you work a lot faster for sure.
it does. I love it. I love it. Have you ever seen that photo of an Italian artist, Cesare Tallone, I think it is?
Mm.
But he has his model, this woman in a dress, and he's doing a sight-size method with this big, I think it was like almost a life-size uh, um, painting of this woman,
Mhm.
and he didn't have it in front at all, and so
Yeah.
he had it just right next to her, and you could just see that he would have to pace so many times, but you would be able to get it so accurate, so quickly. Uh, I just always love those old shots of my favorite artist doing sight size.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
wild.
I mean, it's wild and it's a workout too. I mean, if you're tired of being a sedentary artist sitting around in your studio, try some sight size. It'll get you moving, and before you know it, you got to take a breather because it's
You'll
so
get some
much more
steps in. You'll
distinct.
look at your steps at the end of the day, and you'll be like, "Whoa!"
Exactly, exactly. But that's what's beautiful about it too. It's there's also from what I remember in the academy, just like there's this, I don't know, it just feels so cool to be like I'm moving back and forth and I'm checking, and it's just such a dynamic thing that suddenly this mind body connection kicks in, and it just feels even more meditative,
It is.
in a different way.
That's a good way of explaining it. It's more meditative.
Hmm.
My mind really gets into that. I can really
Yeah.
just meditate on that for hours and hours and hours, and just go back and forth, working out the edges, you know, working out your
Yeah.
lines. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and before you know it, like your intuition really kicks in, and like you'll put down a mark and then you're about to do something to it and you're like, no, 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 and then you step back and then
right.
you check the mark and then you double check and then it turns out it was fine, or maybe it had to shift a little bit to the left or a little bit up. And it just it's I feel like it becomes even more of a dialogue
Hmm. Yeah, totally.
with the painting itself, which is really, really cool. I mean, side size obviously isn't something that you can apply to everything since it's very hard. It's a method that's so specific in terms of location. You really need to have your model right there. Obviously you can play around with the sizes of things by putting your canvas closer or further away, but despite its limits, it can still be a really wonderful method to use for sure,
Great.
for sure.
I feel
Mhm.
like it really connects you with your subject
Yeah,
more so.
for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely, yeah. And then I wanted to ask you because I know now you're working on a lot of paintings for exhibitions, and I wanted to ask you how your process has shifted over time and what you've done to be able to catch up to those deadlines.
Yeah. Well, um, as I was progressing through my career, I would get invited to other shows that were they're fantastic shows. They're in museums. They're amazing people run it, and um, and you want to be a part of all that. And so uh, I started relying more on photography than I had years and years ago. But I always just kind of blended both of them, painting from life and then working from the photos. But um, but luckily I painted from life for a long time, so I know what's missing in the photographs. If I would have started out painting from photographs, uh, like there probably wouldn't be any air in the shadows whenever I was I was working from a photograph. I didn't really know what I was seeing for years painting from life. And that goes for painting landscapes too. So so I feel kind of it's like I got this urge to paint from life more and kind of tip the balance back uh, the way it used to be for me, where I'm not so reliant on the photos as much, just for deadline's sake and getting my deadlines done. So I'm actively trying to do that, trying to get back to that, and that means less shows. And so you'd be in less shows to do better work, you know. So so if I'm going to be working like crazy to meet all these deadlines, your quality is going to suffer. And I look back on my work, and just like we always do, we look back on our work and we're like, man, I could have handled that one a little differently. Yeah, I feel like I didn't think that through, and I want to fix that. I want to I want to try to get better. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's the another push and pull within the career, right? Which is you need to participate in gallery shows, of course, if you know the gallery model is the way that you're making most of your income. And that means, pulling some of your time away from painting in the slower way, right? So there's that adjustment that needs to happen of like, well, I need to turn these in time, or like maybe participate in less shows so I have more work, but then I need more income in a different direction, right? So there's all of these chess pieces that need to be moved about in a particular way.
it's really hard. It's really hard because I mean, my buddies and I, we always talk about this on the phone, or we struggle with this type of thing of
Mhm.
um, we want to do our best work at all times, but we want to be in the shows, but we also want to make enough money to where we can not be freaking out all the time about paying bills and all that. And so, and having that balance is always a challenge. And just like we talked about before, it's like being in, like I feel like I'm in too many shows right now to where it's back to back, and the deadlines are so close together. You don't have opportunity to have a secondary revenue stream going because you're so committed to, to to getting all your deadlines done. And especially as a realist, as we were talking about, it takes us
Yeah.
a long time to do these pieces. And so it's a balance.
Yes. Very
Yeah,
delicate balance.
yeah. And what I think about also, I really think about what I'm leaving behind.
Mhm.
You know, I want to make a living, but I want to leave something behind that's important. You know, and and when I look back on some of the pieces, and I'm like, what the hell was I thinking? You know, that's out there. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I
Hmm.
guess we all have
Hmm.
our own issues about stuff like that, about our own work.
Yeah, I think it's natural. I mean, I feel like many artists, maybe many artists, I'm not sure. I would say many of us are perfectionists and our worst critics, right? So it does, there is that inner feeling of, ooh, how do I let myself do that? But at the same time, you got something done and it was still quite good, right? There's like this balance between you have to have like the little positive voice that tells you, hey man, you did great.
Yeah,
And you were able to sell these paintings. And then there's that little Debbie Downer voice. It's like, could have been
yeah,
better. Um, you can't fully eliminate it because it's still useful, but at the same time, it doesn't help to minimize your accomplishments either because you've been able to
yeah.
do a lot of really awesome things anyway.
Of course. And also you're sharing your work with people who care for your work, and they really enjoy having it, looking at it every day, and those
Mhm.
relationships that you build with your collectors is really, really important. And just to think about, like, someone bought one of your pieces to hang on their wall every day and live with it and take care of it. That is,
Yeah.
man, that is so special. So
Yeah, they have a little piece of you, which
yeah,
is pretty cool. Yeah, so you're still putting something beautiful out there anyway. But I
yeah,
totally relate to that feeling of, oh, it could have been better, or oh, I wish
but
I
but
hadn't done that, or
yeah, but I mean, it was really good at the time. But
yeah.
I mean, if you were looking back and not feeling like you haven't progressed or you haven't grown, um, that's a kind of that'd be a problem. I would want to think that what I was doing in the past is just as good as it is in the present. I would want to be growing, even though that was good back then too, you know.
Mhm.
But I don't know.
Yeah,
It's all relative, I guess.
it is. Yeah. I mean, that's the other really interesting thing now that you mention it is that I feel like we're not machines, right? Nothing in real life is quite so linear, right? It's not like this perfect line that goes up in terms of like improvement. It's usually like little valleys and
Yeah,
then they go up and then they valley a little bit. They go up a little bit and they valley a little bit because, we're all learning as we paint and we improve a bit, and not every painting's gonna be a winner chicken dinner. It's gonna
right.
be, yeah, some paintings are gonna be for the burn pile, as I've mentioned before on the podcast, and some paintings are gonna be like, there's something here.
Yeah,
Um,
or
so
little glimmer
yeah.
of something that you discovered. That's huge. I love
Mhm,
that.
mhm.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
why
for sure.
my buddy Scott Christensen and I, we were talking yesterday. We were always talking about like constantly learning, and that's
Mhm.
what I could recommend to people is just constantly train, constantly uh, try to learn something new by studying past artists or studying different design, different ways of designing, different color harmonies, different everything, and learning to love the abstract. You know, even as a realist, learn to love the
Yeah.
abstract.
Oh my gosh, do you mind elaborating on that a bit?
Well, if you were to take if you were to take any painting that you see that's you know a realist painted it, it's a realistic painting. If you would have taken it into Photoshop and kind of what is that filter that makes it all like poster like? It's like a
Oh yeah,
posterized.
posterize. Yeah.
Yeah, you posterize it, it no longer looks like it's realism. It's like an abstract piece.
Right.
But that's how we block in all of our paintings. You know,
Mhm.
whether it be a landscape or a cityscape or a figure or still life or whatever. If it doesn't have that strong abstraction in there, the composition, the design of it's going to fall apart, and then you're just putting a lot of details on top of something that's not structurally strong, you know. And learning to love the abstract, uh, you you stick with that more. You don't rush over it to get to the realism, like hanging on to the abstraction longer and tightening that thing up, turning your canvas every which way to make sure the design, the abstract design, works in every orientation. Um, I think that makes for a better painting.
Yeah. At BoldBrush, we inspire artists to inspire the world because creating art creates magic, and the world is currently in desperate need of magic. BoldBrush provides artists with free art marketing, creativity, and business ideas and information. This show is an example. We also offer written resources, articles, and a free monthly art contest open to all visual artists. We believe that fortune favors the bold brush. And if you believe that too, sign up completely free at boldbrushshow.com. That's BoldBrush show.com. The BoldBrush Show is sponsored by Faso. Now more than ever, it's crucial to have a website when you're an artist, especially if you want to be a professional in your career. Thankfully, with our special link, faso.com/podcast, you can make that come true and also get over 50% off your first year on your artist website. Yes, that's basically the price of 12 lattes in 1 year, which I think is a really great deal considering that you get sleek and beautiful website templates that are also mobile friendly, e commerce, print on demand in certain countries, as well as access to our marketing center that has our brand new art marketing calendar. And the art marketing calendar is something that you won't get with our competitor. The art marketing calendar gives you day by day, step by step guides on what you should be doing today, right now, in order to get your artwork out there and seen by the right eyes so that you can make more sales this year. So, if you want to change your life and actually meet your sales goal this year, then start now by going to our special link, faso.com/podcast. That's FASO.com/podcast.
Yeah, and actually, it's really great that you mentioned that too, because reality doesn't have lines, right? There's really no actual linear separation amongst things. And having that notion of, like when you posterize an image, especially if it's a figure in a landscape, you oftentimes see that the figure loses some of itself in the landscape naturally. And
Mhm.
visually, that makes sense with the brain, since the brain is usually trying to process information in the most effective way, and it will join things, right? Which is why, working with photography, it's a great tool, but it's awesome that you have that experience of working from life because you know how to manage that impulse that some people might have of copying the image,
Yeah,
which
you get in that trap.
mhm, mhm,
And
yeah,
just also listening to yourself and listening to your own frustrations with whatever you're having a problem with the painting. I've done that for years where I'll be too tied to the photograph or something that's just making it look too boring. And I had some with like uh, the like the market scenes behind a a guy working in the market. A lot of chaos going on behind him, but having to simplify all that. And I was wondering, it's like, why does this thing feel so boring? And I'm like, I got so frustrated, and I just kind of taped off uh, around the with that blue tape stuff. I
mhm,
taped it all off the figure, and then I just completely went abstract in the background. I changed everything and just made the abstraction work with the figure in the front. And then whenever I was satisfied with that, and I wasn't doing it just in like a dark value or like an umber or something like that. I did it within the color harmony range of that painting. So, but it was simplified. But once I got the abstraction where I wanted it, then I took the tape off and exposed the figure that was almost done, and made the I brought out people and people selling stuff within the abstractions. Like some of it would be like in shadow, some of it even light, but then the abstraction uh, supported the figure, and that's what was missing for me.
yeah,
So
yeah, yes, yeah, and the picture is just, when you take a picture of something, it just it makes everything so even, right? Like everything is in focus, usually, unless you're using a very particular lens, right? But everything is usually perfectly in focus and perfectly sharp
right,
equally, right? And I think that's, yeah, it's great that you decided to really abstractify, that's a word,
yeah,
um the background, because you need that balance, right? The eye doesn't work like a camera. We like when I'm looking at you, everything around, my screen is blurry and it's out of focus. And I just see those abstract patches of value differences, not so much color, which is really interesting. But yeah, I think, yeah, you're definitely onto some really good stuff with the abstraction
yeah,
aspect, because it's something I think we take for granted as realist painters, especially over time. It's one of those things where the more you paint, the less you remember the little things when you were starting out. And that's definitely one of those things that now that I'm hearing it again, it's like, oh yeah, that's
well,
important.
I tried to jump over that process
Mm,
in art school a lot because I wanted to get to the fun stuff,
yep.
you know. And so I kind of jumped over it, and then I had to go back and strengthen it again. And so then as I advanced and as time went on, I started realizing I was like, man, because I really like abstract work, whenever it's good. If it's just ridiculous, it bores me. But whenever it's really good abstraction and good modern work, I love it. So And it's like just embracing that in your own work. Uh, you can make some really strong paintings.
For sure. For sure.
So,
Yeah. Yes. Oh, excellent, excellent points. And then I actually want to also touch on when you finished school and when you were working as an illustrator, right? What was it like for you when you decided to quit your day job and go full time as an artist? What was that like for you?
well, it was a little bit stressful. Uh, I was working as an illustrator at a packaging design firm outside Chicago. It's just like just west of the Loop, and I learned a lot there, and I had a great experience. And I didn't even know how to use the computer at all. And we were doing it all by hand, doing marker renderings and doing all kinds of stuff, and then scan it into the computer and manipulate it for our comps and things. Um, but I learned how to use the computer at the advertising agency because I didn't touch that thing all through art school. And so it helps me now. I can actually, you know, do Photoshop and everything else. But after 4 years of working at that ad agency, and I was painting every night after work. We would be doing uh, shared models. We'd be doing portraits, and I would be doing portraits on the side and other things, and then going to the palette and chisel in Chicago. That was huge. You know, I don't know what I would have done without that place. It's such a special, um, special place. And but um, I decided that I just got so frustrated that I just wanted to be working as a fine artist. I just quit. I had like a freak out moment, and I just wanted to change my life, and I didn't want to work as an illustrator anymore, and so I left, and then I went and I did freelance work, and my buddy Mark worked for DDB Needham in Chicago, an advertising agency, and they did a lot of commercials and things, and so he hired me on for doing storyboard work. And so that was doing the side work like that. I was able to pay my bills and then also trying to do more painting and trying to get into galleries and stuff like that. And then I was doing the Oil Painters of America shows, trying to get into those shows, and um, and then and then I got into painting competitions, outdoor painting competitions, and that was a game changer for me, doing landscape paintings, and so I made so many really close, good friendships from plein air competitions, and and um, so that just kind of that helped me kind of transition from commercial work into more fine art work, but also doing all these other things, then make connections with getting into galleries and get into other group shows and start like that. So,
Mhm.
but being in a plein air competition is that's huge training ground. Yeah, you have to be really efficient with your decisions, and you start to recognize your painting stamina and your like you have to really push through these parts of yourself and in your work to get it to a higher stage of finish really quickly. And um, so that was a really good education, and it helped me all throughout the rest of my career.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah. Plein air will make or break you for sure.
it's really
Um,
important for figurative work.
it is, yeah, because I mean, the time pressure, even if you're just, plein air painting on your own without it being a competition, I mean, you're so dependent on light conditions and the sun moves very fast across the sky, or rather the earth rotates quite quickly. So you're
And
limited and you're forced to really simplify without oversimplifying, which I think is one of the harder things to learn because if you oversimplify, suddenly you just have, I mean, like the normal shapes of cylinders and cones and spheres
Mhm.
instead of something a little more abstract, right? So yeah, so for sure. But that's awesome that you were, doing all of these little things at the same time as you're building, your career up, and you're really setting yourself up so that it's a lot easier to really, navigate that roller coaster of freedom
Yeah.
and discipline that the artist has to live by.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But uh, it also instilled discipline too. Discipline is huge. Just to have you know, any kind of career in fine art, and being a gallery artist and being a show artist, and discipline is huge. You know, because you got to make the deadlines.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're not going to be in any shows.
Yes, and you're not gonna have, like your teacher or your boss, because you're your only boss, knocking on your door or like calling you up like, hey, I remember you got that assignment due, right? There's no one to really tell you, which is, why I mentioned that it's, to quote, great with great freedom comes great responsibility. You can't lollygag too much if you got bills to pay. So there's that balance as well, which actually brings me to my next question, which is about, how have you diversified your income streams in order to be able to handle the roller coaster life of an artist?
Yeah, it's not easy, as you know. Doing workshops, doing commissions here and there. Commissions were really tough for me over the years. I do
Mhm.
them every once in a while, but I had different, uh, different rules about how I handle it. I need to have complete freedom. Um, and selling sketches and other little things like that. But workshops is a pretty big. That's a pretty big thing, and I highly recommend people keeping that if you're doing workshops, keep doing workshops, even if you start to sell everything you paint in the galleries. Keep the workshops. Keep that extra revenue stream always humming. I made a mistake. I I, I stopped for a while, and I shouldn't have. And so I'm starting back over these past few years of teaching and everything else, and now that I have a new studio here, I'll be teaching out of here and bringing people from out of state and then locally, and also doing some little videos from around the mountains here and other things, and doing some online stuff. But I just think it's so important um, to have that extra thing going on in the background, you know, because it's a roller coaster ride, and even whenever you're selling everything you paint, you're not always going to sell everything you paint. You're going to have some dry spells, but if you have a good engine humming in the background, uh, that would be a wise choice.
For sure, for sure. And I think also, like, if and I believe you mentioned that you do this, if you have any small studies,
Yeah,
right, that you can sell on your own through social
yeah,
media or
yeah, I have a little category on my website that I do little rounds of whatever things I have in the studio that I've never put in the gallery. Um,
Mm.
but it might be interesting for some people because it might be some experiments that I'm working on, but they're good. They're good pieces, but they're not anything I'm going to show in a gallery.
Right.
But sometimes I put those things out there. So
Yeah. 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 And then another important aspect, and you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but how have you maintained your relationship with collectors? Like, how have you navigated that? And then what would you recommend for someone to do to maintain those relationships?
man, um, my collectors, there's a lot of them they have turned into like family members
Oh.
and really, really special people in my life. And obviously, carve out some time, make a phone call,
Mm.
and catch up with them. Send some emails just to let them know you're thinking about them, or share them with them with some new stuff you're working on or whatever. It makes me nervous sometimes because I don't want to like be too business-like, where it's like I don't want to have them all like on a, yeah, I mean, you can definitely do that if you want to just want to give them information about the shows you got coming up. You have your email list of all your collectors.
Mm.
You can put it out there and just show them. But the more the other types of just communication is just not trying to push a sale. You know, it's like your friends, and they're taking care of your babies.
Yeah.
So it's pretty special. And so I try not to be too business-like and just, you have a friendship.
Yeah.
So, but there is a place for doing all the email newsletters and things like that.
Mhm. Mm. Yeah, and actually, now that you bring it up, how do you personally manage your newsletters?
Through my website, through FASO,
Oh, cool.
Art
Yeah.
Studios Online. That's what I have my website through, and they've been fantastic for 20 years. I've been using them, I think. It's been a
Jeez.
long time.
Yeah.
So I couldn't recommend a better website provider
Mm, mhm.
for artists.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the really great part about it is the ease of use. But then also I wanted to also ask like, in terms of because this is something that really makes me curious. Obviously FASO has like really neat um templates and stuff for the newsletters and stuff, but do you find like how often do you like to send your newsletters? Because like, do you find that sometimes you feel like, oh, I don't want to annoy my people, or
Yeah.
maybe I don't have energy for this right now. Like, how often do you like to send them out?
Oh, I am horrible at it, and I'm trying to get better at it. I mean, I mean, I get so bogged down with so focused
Mm,
in finishing my paintings and getting all my subject matter together and everything. I forget sometimes, to be honest. And thank God for my
mm,
girlfriend because Carrie, she helps me a ton. Just like saying, "Hey, you got to get that email newsletter out. You got to do this. You got to do that." I'm like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I forgot about that." And
yeah.
so it's really helpful to have a partner that keeps you on track. And
Hmm.
because as artists, we can get pretty scatterbrained and kind of go into your cave and not come out for a while. So
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know, what do you think? I would recommend like once a month or once every 2 months or depending on
yeah.
what you
I
have
mean,
going on in your life. I mean, you don't want to be repetitive.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so much goes into painting already that it's sometimes hard. I know some artists maybe struggle with writing, for example, like like it feels like I'm talking too much about myself, right? So I mean like that's like you've said about the collectors, right? It feels weird to be salesy or to be, I don't want to say boastful, but to be so self-centered in that way.
Right.
But I think it really depends. I mean, a lot of the people that I've interviewed, they might do like a recent person I interviewed, she does quarterly, like a year, which is really nice
I think that's
because
better.
it's less frequent for her and she likes writing, but she likes putting thought into it so she can send longer newsletters. And then there are people who send them more frequently, but they're usually shorter, more to the point, little vignette style, stuff about
Well,
their
and
current
and
work.
and, and you can through the newsletter, say if you're doing it quarterly, I like that. That's a good idea.
Hmm.
You can put a lot more information into it. Um, and then you could recommend if you want more information on, you could go to my Instagram account or my Facebook
Hmm.
account where I do more intimate type scenes or intimate
Right.
types, informative types things going on. And if they want to see more,
Right.
otherwise people get, everyone has busy lives. They're going to get annoyed if you're sending it too much.
Yeah, yeah. Though it's really interesting that statistically, artist newsletters have the highest open rate and the
Really.
lowest like unsubscribing count compared to other types of newsletters, which is something to really, it gives you peace of mind that the people who usually sign up for your newsletter are people who actually care and want to
Right.
hear from you. And doing it quarterly is really great too. because they know when to expect it and they're more excited about it because they're like, oh my God, this artist that I love, and like I haven't heard from them in a while, and it's their 1 out of 4 newsletters a year.
Yeah. And there's stuff going on in that amount of time, because
Exactly.
I've gotten some artist email newsletters where they were coming out every 2 or 3 weeks,
Mm.
and I was like, holy moly, how do they do that? That's a lot of work in that, and how could you have that much stuff going on in that amount of time? That would be
Hmm.
different. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah. So it's
each
worth a
is each
shot.
is each his own, whatever works. You know,
Yes.
and it's
Exactly.
also, everyone has a different work pace too,
Mhm.
where it takes me a long time to do my work, and I can't just pump it out, and so. Uh, Doing them on a quarterly basis would make more sense because then you'd have a lot more stuff to show and have
Yes.
more stories about it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one thing to be, a studio painter, or even, someone like you who does, this very intense realism versus someone who does, smaller plein air, right? I
Mhm.
mean, if you do like a small plein air painting, you whip those out easy peasy and you can whip out a lot of them, which is nice. So it makes it seem like you're pumping out a lot of work, but it's really just dependent on subject matter and process.
And that's really
So,
cool too. I mean, I love seeing
yeah.
that stuff, you know.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah.
And I think it's awesome that they can pump it out quite quickly. So it's, there's that balance of like, again, process. Like, what's your process? What do you care about? What do you want to focus on with your work? Because there's really no right or wrong answer, right? It's whatever makes you happy. Kind of like the timing for newsletters. It's
Yeah.
whatever
Glad you
meets
mentioned that
and
quarterly
suits.
though. I think I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, go for it. And then let us know how it goes because I should also do a quarterly newsletter.
Well,
We'll tell each other how it goes.
yeah. Well, I was talking to someone about that where they were uh, giving me advice on how to structure all that stuff, and so
Mhm.
she was mentioning like preparing like your email newsletter, like like the first two, like even like the body of it, preparing it
Mhm.
for the first 2 or 3 um, emails, in the future.
Mm.
But just
Right.
prepare the body of it, and then that way you can just start putting in your images and then kind of like tweaking it up, and it takes way less time than starting from scratch. And I thought that was a good idea. So
Yeah.
haven't done
Yeah,
it
that's all in due time. All in due time. You are of course pressured by your deadlines. So I think, focusing on your paintings is probably it's always going to be the higher priority anyway compared to newsletters, but newsletters are definitely very useful for the future.
yet. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, and then speaking of advice as well, what advice would you give to someone who wants to become a full-time artist?
Well, it's kind of like what we were talking about before. Is get hooked up with a group of people that get together to paint portraits or paint landscapes together. Um, I started this group called Plein Air Painters of Chicago years and years ago, and they're still going on now. And they have a large group of people. They go out every Saturday and they paint outside. And just being around other artists and sharing your ideas and their advice. And I learned a lot from people that I painted with about how I could get into shows and get into galleries and finding out a lot more information than I could have ever gleaned on my own.
Mm.
And then doing like competitions, just getting your name out there. And because you never know when you might get discovered by a gallery just because you had your work in a show. And just constantly train, constantly practice all the time. And because it's always going to be your work is going to be the most important thing that you're going to be leading with, and you have to constantly get better. And we're still doing it now, constantly training, constantly trying to get better, and talk to somebody that has some good business sense um, with with building the business side of your of your career. You know, yeah, I wish I would have done that earlier on.
Mm.
You know, I was just so fixated on the painting.
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking as much as I should have been about building a foundation, like a business foundation, because that just wasn't the way my mind was working. I was obsessive, compulsive artist. So,
Yeah, but I think that's natural too. I think for us, it's such a passion that
mm,
the business side is always so secondary. And I mean, it's also kind of prioritized that way anyway, because without art, you don't have a business anyway. You have to create in order to sell, to have that income. So I think it's totally normal, but I agree, having that business mind kick in the background, playing in the background while you're painting as many paintings as you can, and you're learning on the go, doing all these things. It's very useful for sure. Yeah.
it's very, very important. Very
Hmm.
important. Uh, I always really admire uh, some of my friends that can do both really well. And I'm
Yeah.
like, man, that is so incredible. I admire so much for being able to do that because it's always like if I'm not painting or working on one of my pieces or sketching and coming up with ideas, doing the whole business side frustrates me. And I think I should have embraced it a lot more. I'm embracing it more now, but it's like I'm like okay, let's get this done. Okay, get back to the easel, you know.
Yes.
But also some of my friends too, they hire someone to take care of that part time, and
Mhm.
that's also an excellent thing to do.
Yeah.
If that's just not your
Yeah.
strength, hire someone to do it part time. It's worth the money.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, there are a few ways to go about it. Like you said, you do it yourself, you hire someone, or you could also just take maybe some business classes.
Right. Yeah.
Because I mean,
Learn as much
I
as you
have
can.
I exactly, so that you know what you really need in order to function as a business, and to also see your work in that sense. And then if you do have someone in your family or in your friend circle who's quite good at that, you could hire them as well. That would be great. Yeah. Yeah, totally. But yeah, and then I want to ask you about your upcoming workshops and exhibitions.
Well, my buddy Scott Christensen and I are going to be doing a workshop together at the end of May, May 30th through June 3rd. And it's a combination of landscapes and figures in the
Mm.
landscape, and kind of blending the two, because he's an amazing uh, landscape artist. And so blending our skills would is going to be a very interesting workshop. It'll be very unique. So because we both love to paint outdoors, and I love to paint the figure and paint portraits, and we're going to be sharing a lot of those ideas and how to and how to put the figure into your landscape where it's believable as well, you know, where you have your color harmonies syncing up with everything and it looks natural, and
Mhm.
and a lot of other things that we're going to be going over. So it should be a fun workshop, you know. And
Yeah.
so that's the only workshop I got going on right now. And then I got the Briscoe Museum Night of the Artist show coming up this weekend. And I just have one piece in there, and there's a lot of fantastic artists in that show. And then the Prix show. This will be my 11th year in that show. That's coming up in June, and so that's what I'm finishing. That one behind me is going to be in the Prix
Mm.
and then the horse that's right there. That's
Mm.
just right in the beginning stages, but I got to finish that soon. So that's due next month to ship it out of here actually. So I don't have much time, and
Yeah.
yeah, and then it's just going to be getting my place ready for classes here, and um, and then putting together some workshops around the country. So yeah,
That is so exciting.
yeah, it's going to be fun. So
Yes. Yeah, it sounds amazing. Especially like I'm really I think, anyone out there who really wants to figure out how to put a figure in a landscape believably, they would totally benefit from doing a proper workshop on it because I think that's one of the hardest things to do when you're making a narrative painting for sure.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like at the American Academy, Mr. Krajewski, my fundamentals instructor, my teachers are always like humming around in my mind all the time, even when I'm painting today. And then learning perspective, learning how to put a figure in there and make sure that they're in proper relationship to everything else. And then having all the colors that are around the figure in the figure, and it looks believable, uh, where it's not looking like a cutout. You know what I mean? And I see it all the time where you'll have someone with like blue jeans on, and it's like cobalt blue, light and dark, maybe just a few touches of other colors, but they're in with a bunch of green grass around them, and there's no green in those pants. And so it's like you got to put that green in the pants in order for it to look believable, and it'll still read as a blue jean, but it will look like it's harmonized with the air and the scene around it. So
Mm.
that's what like painting from life is huge. Like doing landscapes from life, doing everything from life, and putting the figure out there, and isolating your colors in relationships to everything that's around it. You'll start to see, holy crap, there is so much influence of that green into the clothing or into the flesh, you know. And so yeah, so I love all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and you bring up a great point because I mean the way that most people might attempt to paint jeans like you said, right, those two different blues, that kind of reminds me of when you're a kid and you have a coloring book, right, where everything is its own separate thing instead of like this like
Yeah,
whole image that of course like I mentioned earlier like with side size for example like you have this whole environment around it as well that you have to see like the big picture. You have to step back and really focus on that as well. Yeah.
right. You have to when you're painting and you're making your relationship decisions, you have to think and feel all the way around the subject on how everything
Hmm.
is influencing what you're painting, no matter what you're painting. And so if you have that, train your mind to think larger instead of like right at your subject you're painting. Always think about the air, always thinking about the reflected light, everything that's going to be influencing it. I'll be looking over here because I'll notice something in the side of someone's leg in their flesh. I'd be like, why does that have that red color in there? And I'll start looking around at everything and then noticing that there was some strange thing that was catching the light that was influencing the model. And then I'd put my mirror upside down on my head and look at the model, and I'd be like, holy crap, that was way stronger than I thought it was, you know? So,
The delicate balance of person and environment and color and value and woof,
yeah,
man,
keeping
painting
all
is
those threads, keeping all those threads connected.
yeah,
Yeah.
painting is just a beautiful, crazy puzzle. And that kind of reminds me again of your work as an electrician. It's a
Yeah,
puzzle that has to come together.
a lot of overlaps there.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Amazing. Oh man. And then where can people see more of your work?
Well, my website, scottpowersfineart.com,
Mhm.
and at Settlers West Galleries in Tucson, and Loom Gallery West in Phillipsburg, Montana, and just my social media, my Instagram and Facebook. My Instagram handle is Scott Tallman Powers, and my Facebook, Scott Tallman Powers, and then I have another one, Scott Powers Fine Art. But I haven't figured out how to make like a business page, a Facebook
Mm,
business page, where you don't have to have like a friend thing. They just follow.
right.
Then you can
Right.
have unlimited amount of people. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I think yeah, there's a way to do that. But I did that forever ago and I honestly don't remember how I did it.
yeah, but someone told me recently that you can't take your uh, your page and
Mhm.
just transfer it into and keep all your followers.
Oh, I didn't know
you can do that
That's cool.
anymore.
You can? Oh,
I don't,
shoot.
yeah,
Huh.
because I think they could do that before. You
Right.
could do that before, but I don't think you can do it now. I could be wrong,
Fascinating.
but that's what someone told me.
Well, it's worth
That's a
looking into just in case. Yeah.
yeah. And so then
Yeah.
you got to start one from scratch, and then just kind of like get people to sign up for that to
Yeah.
where, yeah,
Build it up again. Yeah.
yeah,
Dang.
I know,
A lot of work.
I know, I know.
Oh man. Well, thank you so much, Scott, for your awesome company and your advice and all of your awesome stories.
This has been a pleasure. Thanks so much, Laura, and thanks for everyone who's
Yeah.
watching.
Yes,
So
of course. Yeah. And then, of course, all your links are in the show notes for anyone who wants to go check those out, sign up for the workshop or your newsletter, check out your
thanks.
beautiful work. And
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.